There we go.
We are recording. Take it away, Marianne.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marianne Snow, and I've been elected as the lead-off today for today's Teams Thursdays, which is happening on Monday, by the way. But, you know, given everything that has happened with the world today, it seems only fair that we should be running our Teams Thursday event on a Monday. Obviously, our goal initially when we started working with Mark and his team at Simpraxis was for all of us to be able to get in front of you in person on the Teams Thursdays here in New England, because that's not possible, but because we are on the front lines of the types of changes and the types of strategies that people are implementing to be able to move forward in this day and age of the coronavirus. We thought that it was important to role model some of the online ways that people are taking things online in order to be able to continue to work. Obviously, millions of in-person events, both large and small.
Teams Thursday meeting. It's actually on Monday, April 6th. This is Mary Ann Snow speaking.
And, you know, that was very lovely. And I'm so glad that folks are able to hear us. Obviously, when you're doing large or small events and you're doing things in a virtual setting, you're going to run into all sorts of different things. And we know that some of you might be very familiar with doing in-person events, much less so online events. And so our goal today is to provide you with a run book for how to put these virtual events together, and really to emphasize some of the big differences between an in-person event versus an online event. We're also going to talk about presenting different types of format options, and my colleague Kate Pugh is going to talk with you a little bit about ways to organize yourself. Mark Anderson from Simpraxis is actually going to talk about a recent live event, and not a live event, but a virtual event that he attended, which was supposed to be live event, but they took it virtual and they did a great job. And then we've got the wonderful Chris Bortlick here coming from Microsoft. We're using the Microsoft Teams platform for this event, just to give you some sort of a sense of how this works. And we're going to leave some times for questions so that we'll have a chance to talk to you about questions as well. So one of the things that we did was we made a conscious choice to use Microsoft Teams. Actually, you can just go to the next one, Chris. Thanks. We made a choice to use Microsoft Teams to give you a chance, if you haven't played with the platform, to push some buttons and learn a bit about the technology so that you can make decisions about whether this is a good platform for you as you think about how to virtualize your event. And so we're going to give you that chance by allowing you an opportunity to also engage with us today by typing feedback in the chat window. There's an opportunity for you to be able to put your hand up. We've got a little bit of a background here for you to be able to take yourself through those steps. And so we hope that you'll reach out to us through these means, not only so you have a chance to learn how it works, but also so that we can hear from you, because we're really interested in learning about some of the things that you're struggling with. So Chris, if you can give me the next slide. The four of us have been working together for several weeks now, really working hard to translate a lot of the information that people would have seen in the Teams Thursdays to online forums related to some of the current problems that we know are in affecting everybody. So Chris, whether we're talking about Chris and his background with the Teams platform, whether we're talking about Kate and her work as a professor, whether we're talking about Mark Anderson, many of you know through his work with Simpraxis, And then my work with Sophia, where we work with the technology companies to help with the people side of things as well as the operational process.
People,
the people behind the technology. Yeah. So we always want to think about ways to engage people when we're doing any sort of a virtual event. And one of the things that we've been doing with you is we're interested in finding out what are the things that, some of the things that you're struggling with. Unsurprisingly, when we did our survey, and thank you very much to everybody who participated, two things really jumped out. Obviously, the technical setup. If you're going to virtualize a meeting, what does that look like, right? How do you pick a platform? How do you think about what type of an operations crew do you need? Because if you're going to virtualize something, it'll be a little bit different. You're not setting up food tables and thinking about how to get people registered through a registration desk. Suddenly you're doing everything on a technical platform. So there are those considerations. And then you've got the second piece, which is the event facilitation and the engagement of participants. Virtual events work differently than in-person events. And this is a particularly important consideration. And so as Mark and Kate and Chris take you through today's topic, please understand that we're trying to help you proactively think about some of the shifts in thinking, as well as some of the changes that you have to make in that run book so that you can very specifically be accomplished in this forum. And so we hope that you feed us some questions, because we know that this is really a new horizon for a lot of you. So thanks very much for participating in our survey. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kate Pugh and have her jump in and talk a little bit about. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I'm going to turn this over to Chris Bortlick. He's going to talk to you a little bit about Microsoft online event options. So take it away, Chris.
Great. Thanks, Marianne. Again, everyone, I appreciate you all joining us today. I know a few of you are in the East Coast, some of you are overseas, so I do appreciate everyone joining us. As Marianne mentioned, my name is Chris Bortlick. I'm a principal architect at Microsoft. Been with the company 12 years and really helped customers develop their strategy around collaboration with tools like Microsoft Teams. And as I engage with customers, and as we as Microsoft work with our customers during these times, been really happy with some of the guidance that the product teams have put out there. And we're not going to read through the content today, but know that in the next hour, we're going to cover some of the best practices and tips, but there are some really great blog posts that the product teams have put out there that we're going to point you at. I know there's a very large summary spreadsheet we put out that has a lot of things in it, but we really want to point out really 3 posts throughout today. The first one is something that was done by Jared Spataro in the Microsoft 365 product team a couple of weeks back, and really talking about some of the solutions Microsoft offers in Microsoft 365 to support online meetings and events. So today we're going to focus a lot on leveraging Microsoft Teams for running meetings inside of Teams. If there's time later in the day, we'll talk about Microsoft 365 Live events, and we're not going to get into LinkedIn Live and PowerPoint Live, which are other tools that Microsoft makes available. But when we really think about online meetings and the different sorts of online meetings from a Microsoft perspective, if you have a meeting that is for 250 people or less, like we're doing today, we really want you to think about using Microsoft Teams as that tool for those meetings. Really great for staff meetings, brainstorming, running these smaller events. And Mark's going to talk about an example where the Microsoft product teams, as part of these Microsoft Most Valued Professional Summits that Mark participates in, actually leveraged Microsoft Teams in a very unique way that I know I really hadn't thought about much before. Mark's going to talk through some of the lessons learned and best practices for running events like we're doing today, but also running larger events that might have multiple tracks and multiple sessions. Microsoft 365 Live events is another part of the platform that historically has supported up to around 10,000 attendees. We made an announcement last week that we will now support large events up to 100,000 attendees. And people might say, when would I ever need an event that's 100,000 employees or attendees? Well, that could be something like Microsoft Ignite and our conferences like Ignite and Build, which we've had to announce are going to be virtual only through the next calendar year, really. It might be things like you're doing around community. So Marianne mentioned some of the work that she's been doing with state and local government and other hospitals and others that might have to broadcast to people. So live events is a great platform for more of a one-way dialogue, much like we're doing where we're broadcasting large events. But Microsoft's own CEO, Satya Nadella, leverages live events with our leaders across Microsoft to broadcast to employees, much like we did last week, talking about what's happening around the globe and bringing in Microsoft leaders from China, from Italy, from Canada, from the United States to actually talk about things. And we're really facilitating the discussion more through Q&A. So with that, I'm going to flip things over to Kate to kind of talk about some of the best practices that she's been seeing around organizing and planning for large events.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Marianne. So you guys probably know me. Certainly many of you are familiar faces from the last event. I am a faculty member at the Information and Knowledge Strategy Master's Program at Columbia University, former academic director, and I ran that program for 6 years. And a big responsibility that I had was helping move that program into a hybrid environment. Our students were primarily virtual. They were all over the globe, and most of the education was done virtually. So I had to survive that for quite a few years, and this is basically mother's milk to me. So one of the challenges for me is to remember that it's not mother's milk to everybody. There are some things we all need to learn. So we put together what we're calling a run book. I'm not going to go through it. We put some check marks here, boxes here. You print out these slides. You're going to all have copies of them. These are things you must attend to. For example, when you're preparing your speakers, you do want to make sure you have a rehearsal. And when you're preparing your attendees, you want to make sure that people know how to use the various different tools. So Marianne showed that to us. It's an opportunity for you as a veteran of this experience to get some time in their shoes. Imagine what it's like for the first time to go on Teams. Let's look at the next slide. We put together for you a simple acronym so that you can remember all the things you need to do the day of the event and during the event. You're going to be making your speaker shine. And you're going to make sure that your speaker and your attendees feel comfortable. You're creating psychological safety. For example, you'll notice number 3, or the E, represents entertain. You notice that Marianne had some humor and she had some real substance as she brought us together. That's a strategy. That wasn't just because she's an amazing speaker, which she is. That was because she knew she was convening us. And it's a really important thing for you to know that you're convening others. Next slide is basically what you do after the event. Know that you're going to be putting together a run book, not unlike this one. We recommend you start with this, and you're going to make it better and better each time you have these experiences. Back over to Mark.
That's where I push the unmute button. So I wanted to thanks for that, Kate. I think that you know, having done a bunch of events, either in person or virtual, you end up. We use OneNote for instance, SharePoint Saturday New England or Teams Thursday New England, and we're just building up. Each time we do an event, we know more about what worked and what didn't, and we're always building that up. So that run book, that sort of lessons learned thing. I always hate the term post-mortem, but when you're done with a meeting, it's not dead. But you should make sure that you record what you learned, what worked well, so that you can go through it the next time better. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the MVP Summit, which is something that I'm not allowed to talk about, right? The first rule of MVP Summit is you don't talk about MVP Summit. But I'm talking about just how the event works and sort of what had to change this year because of the current global crisis that we're in. And it was an interesting experience. So I wanted to try and share some of the color and feeling from it. So historically, the MVP Summit, in case you don't know what it is, the MVP award is something that Microsoft gives out to people who are way smarter than I am, and I snuck in somehow. And it's usually on-site in Redmond and Bellevue. So we're physically on the Microsoft campus. We're all staying in a bunch of hotels, so we see each other, throughout the entire week. It's a very, very powerful experience to be a part of because you're with people who share a lot of the same passions. So the in-person part of that is, in some ways almost as important as the content. So it's an incredibly complex event because you have 2,000 to 4,000 MVPs coming from all over the world. And They speak all different languages. They have different ways to get there. It's just, if you think about the logistical challenge, I mean, the fleet of buses that they have just to move people around on campus, and those people are phenomenal. It's really impressive. Hundreds of sessions, social events, product group meetings. I mean, there's so much going on during the course of that week. It's really packed in. By the time you leave, you're exhausted. Go ahead, Chris. So this year, obviously, something came up right before the event was supposed to happen. I actually don't remember exactly the dates, but I think it was early March. And so they canceled or changed their thought about the event 2 weeks before. So they went from hosting a live event with thousands of people flying in from around the world to doing it entirely virtually in Microsoft Teams. We give them sessions that are going to be valuable to them based on this entirely new circumstance. Did I mention that they canceled it 2 weeks before the event? I just want to stress this. So, if you think that you can't do something like this, imagine what these folks went through in those 2 weeks. So go ahead, Chris. So how did it work? How did they set it up? Well, Microsoft Teams was the vehicle, and one wouldn't be surprised about that. This is Microsoft Teams. But they used the tool set, I think, to great advantage. I mean, they really thought about how do you get all of those people who normally are walking through hallways and going from building to building and meeting with different people to actually get content that's valuable. They started with some Microsoft Live events for keynotes. So people like Jeff Teeper, who runs the SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, and pretty much the rest of the empire, part of Microsoft, did a live keynote, right? So those Microsoft Live events are meant for really outward focused content. We're doing a Teams meeting here, and Chris is going to talk a little bit more about the difference between the two. But a live event is really, it's like your intranet. It's a way to talk out to a lot of people as opposed to having a lot of interaction, which is a Teams meeting like this one. They had a Teams channel per track. And in our case, in the MVP Summit sense, it's per award grouping. So I'm an Office and Office servers and applications MVP. So that was one of my tracks. We had several tracks actually for that because it's pretty wide, with a moderator per track. So you do need somebody who's going to sort of tend those channels and make sure that people sort of know when the next meeting is coming up and ask questions, is this really the speaker, all that sort of stuff. People could navigate from track to track based on their interests. It was rather than having a lot of locked down kinds of sessions, which is sometimes the case in the live event, they opened it all up to everybody. So anyone could go from channel to channel over the course of the week and visit sessions that they thought were valuable. And that was nice because there's a lot of cross-pollination that way. And it's actually more like what a large sort of third-party conference would be like. You sort of decide whether you want to follow your own focus or you want to learn from new focus areas. There's an event support channel to resolve issues. There are always issues with the technology, always. We had a big, long conversation on Twitter over the weekend about, Zoom's really easy and Teams can be a little bit harder, but there's always a problem with technology. Some people have no problem with it. Some people struggle with it. Sometimes I struggle with it. It doesn't matter. There's having some sort of a support channel that's dedicated is really, really important. We use shared OneNote notebooks in each channel to help with sort of networking. People took their notes in those notebooks together. You get sort of the co-authoring experience. It's not sort of co-authoring, you get a co-authoring experience. So people were actually building up notes as a sort of a crowdsourced set of notes, which is a very powerful way to have things go because people are hearing different things and maybe having separate side thoughts and, maybe putting a few things over in the corner that they thought of that other people hadn't. And then finally, there were some social channels for making connections. Nothing planned in there other than, they tried to do some trivia challenges and things like that. But it was more to try to replicate what it feels like when you're together in one place. Okay, Chris. So I think it went really, really well. I mean, again, 2 weeks before the event, they decided to make this virtual. So, there were a couple things that I saw that I think would make it work better. And Chris will actually show you how some of these work when he does the demo in a couple of minutes. One is to reserve the general channel, and you would set up a team. They set up a team for the event, so the MVP Summit team, but there's always a general channel. And they locked that out so that nobody could have any chats in there, but they didn't use it as a way to communicate out. And I think that would be a really great place to be. Coming up in the next hour, here are the sessions that you might want to go to, and here are the links to those sessions. Or we're having a real problem with whatever it is. Here's the answer to that. Something that's more isolated than the event support thing, which is more of a discussion. Keep the communication flowing. I think that's always a problem whenever you're having an event. It doesn't matter whether you're in person or not. The people who are running the event have to keep communicating with the people who are attending the event, because stuff changes. That we know the air conditioning is too cold in room 7, so we'll take care of that. Or the microphone here is a problem. Or as speakers, we talk to each other, like, the tech in this room is actually not that great, so make sure you have a good cable, that sort of stuff. So what's working? What's not working? Talk about that. Where are the problems? What are people struggling with? Let's make sure that there are ways to help them out. Content and speaker changes. Calendars are a challenge, because we had, I think it was, I can't remember the exact number. It was hundreds and hundreds of sessions, and you needed to have a way to add those to your calendar. So coming up with some better way for that to happen, I think I'm not sure there's a technical solution to that right now, but that was one of the struggles. So if you host an event like this, think about how you're going to make sure that people know how to get into each meeting. And have it on their calendar to start with. And then think about the social aspects. I think maybe back off a little bit when you're trying to do a virtual event, because you just can't replace the thing that you get when people are in a room together. I think some of the people who had not been to an MVP Summit before really like the social stuff. So I'm not saying you should shut it off, but I think you have to know the culture of the group. If you're doing this for an internal something internal to your organization, and you know that your culture is not sort of goofy enough to be sending animated GIFs to each other, and I do say GIFs, not GIFs, then maybe the social channel isn't going to be something that's going to have much value. If your culture is one where there's lots of back and forth and goofiness, like we have at Sympraxis, we make fun of each other constantly, because that's how we work well together. Then the social stuff is really good. So understand what the grouping, what is the group of people that you're holding this event for, and how are they going to interact with each other? And think about also, do those social aspects, and I think Kate alluded to this, do those social aspects fit into what your goals are for the event? If your goal to have people come together is networking, it is to have a social aspect, it is to, or would have been, to have cocktail hours and contests and all that sort of stuff, and you can't do that stuff because you're going virtual, then that social channel, those social aspects actually become very important, because they're part of the goals of your event. If it's more like a press conference kind of thing, social's not the point. If you're just trying to get information out, that's not really the idea. But if you're trying to replace an event that would have been live with a virtual event, I think the social aspect could be really important. I think that was my last slide. And now Chris is going to show you how does this actually work.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Before I jump in, any questions so far from the group?
How do you get those cool backgrounds, Chris, on your screen? Like, looks like you're at the beach. I've got a painting. I just wanted to bring that up in case anyone else wondered.
Coming soon, Mark. Coming soon. Yep, the background image is coming soon. I'll actually show folks what it's going to look like.
That is a feature of Teams that is coming soon. Chris gets early advantage of that, of course.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, great. So what we're going to do in the next, whatever we need, 15, 20 minutes or so, because we want to make sure we have time for your questions, is we're going to focus, as Mark mentioned, really around using the Teams meeting experience. We're not going to get into creating and managing a live event. There are a bunch of resources we've pulled together that go through running a live event, just like Jeff Teeper's keynote or how Satya does his CEO connection within Microsoft. But what we did is we basically started to build out a similar team structure. The first I want to walk you through kind of envisioning what a team might look like if you're doing a similar approach as Mark did for his MVP Summit. And then we'll go behind the scenes and I'll show you a bit around scheduling the meetings, some of the meeting controls you can leverage, as well as some of the things you can use within a meeting for actually driving some of that engagement. So this is our team that we're actually using for the planning of this event. Now, I'm not going to go in the general channel because this is where we're doing a lot of our internal discussion and all that. I can see, though, that we've organized this into 2 different tracks. So imagine in Mark's case, there were different tracks focused on the type of MVP they are. So Mark does a lot around SharePoint. Other people might do more around doing things with Windows Desktop or security and compliance or what have you. So you can organize the event based on different tracks. What I've done within each of the tracks in the channels is we've pinned certain key tabs. So maybe we actually had some survey that we did in advance, like the survey we did with you all, and I actually wanted to pin and share that survey, that form with inside of the channel. Maybe I wanted to pin out to some external web page. So Mark mentioned one of the challenges was having an agenda or a schedule. So just like how we're doing Teams Thursday, one option could have been to maybe have a web page that might have linked to the agenda with all of the meeting join information and all of that. You can also leverage Teams as we're doing for the actual event planning. So this probably wouldn't be something you would expose to the attendees, but we've been leveraging Microsoft Planner to actually do the pre-event, the during the event, the post-event. And as you can see, we have another webinar coming up next week on April 16th. So we still need to deliver that event. But we can basically bring together all of the different content that might be relevant to certain channels. Now, for the actual meeting itself, what we did is we actually created the meeting and scheduled it directly in the channel itself. So we do have an option to create a meeting and to do it as a Meet Now. Meet Now is not something I'm going to spin up right now. One of the challenges with doing a Teams meeting and a Teams meeting demo in a Teams meeting is I can only actively be joined in one meeting at a time. But what a Meet Now allows you to do, and I'm not going to join it, I'll just kind of click on the button, is it allows you to spin up a virtual water cooler, if you would. So a lot of times I see organizations might not have a scheduled meeting, but they may want to just put out a meeting, and then anyone that's in the channel can see the meetings happening to just kind of drop into the meeting. What I did for this, though, is I went ahead and created a scheduled meeting. So I certainly can do it from Microsoft Outlook, but I also can do it directly from Teams. And in the channel, I can go ahead and actually schedule the meeting. So I'm not going to walk through scheduling the meeting, but it works very similar to creating any other team meeting. The difference being, instead of just explicitly inviting people, which I still can do, I can also just invite a specific channel. And then anyone that's a member of the channel that's following the channel will actually go ahead and get the notification. So when I was doing this last week, Mark was telling me he was getting email notifications, letting him know that the meeting was being scheduled for each of the meetings that he was part of the channel. I, as the organizer, also have the meetings showing up on my calendar as well. So the Event 1 channel looks pretty similar to the Event 2 channel in that, again, channel 2 could have different tracks for different content with different sessions. And again, we could pin different tabs and different people could be following and joining the channel. Here's that example of the support back channel that Mark was mentioning. So Mark was mentioning that maybe he was having problems with his audio and he was having problems with joining the audio appropriately. So I went ahead and posted out to an article that's out there that talked about how to join a Teams meeting and manage your audio, your speaker, your mic, your camera. I also went ahead and linked out to a page that we're going to review with you later on, where we have actually end user training resources. So Mark mentioned some of the challenges people might have with leveraging different tools. So Zoom was really designed for one purpose, one application, just for online meetings, and they're a great company and have a great product. Teams does more than just meetings. Teams also does collaboration and persistent chat and file sharing and other things that Zoom might need third-party applications for. So because Teams has different capabilities, you might choose to enable everything for your users, or you might choose to turn off some of the features and maybe just focus on the meeting experience. So we've built a whole set of training resources that focus just on different scenarios, whether it's working from home, leveraging Teams for meetings, posting messages, doing chat, etc. And again, maybe this would be a helpful resource to just pin here for other people that aren't used to using Teams, to give them some quick tips and tricks on how to actually use the products.
Hey, Chris, we have a question from Dirk. I think you could demo this pretty quickly. If you go into the general channel and go into our notebook, I think I've made it an innocuous link. So that we can talk a little bit about how the notebook works. Well, actually, do it in the context of the team, because I think that actually gets to Dirk's question. So if you go into the general channel and you click on the notebook tab, we've added a notebook tab that shows the notebook from the underlying Teams VirtualMania site. This is a page that has our rebrandly links. These are the links that you would have gotten. And as I type things here, you'll start to see those show up on Chris's screen, though it might take a second. So this is that collaborative note-taking idea that I was talking about. If you're not seeing what I changed yet, it's just a sync problem, but you get the idea. Yep, so there it is. So you see who changed things. You see my initials up there, MA. And we can all work together. It's a little bit. It's not a full, not a real-time sync. You often have a little delay like that, but it still works really, really well. We use it when we're doing meetings with clients. Where several of us from Synpraxis are talking to somebody and we're taking notes. Hopefully that answers your question, Dirk.
Yeah, and I love to use the full OneNote client, whether it's on my Windows device or on my iPhone, because again, as Mark mentioned, I can have multiple different notebooks for other things like working with customers. But again, this is actually how we're doing a lot of our planning and creating our outline, as well as just working together on the demo script.
And I'm going to just jump in really quick because we've been using it with clients who are quite unused to these types of forums. For a lot of you may have, I'm seeing in the chat that people have had experiences with these type of collaboration events. And when we get to our third session, we're going to talk about this online brainstorming and collaboration. So Chris can do additional deep dives. But remember, you're probably going to be doing this with people who are quite new to these environments. And so the more that you can build this in as a mechanism for engagement, and the more that you can build this into almost a team experience, right? Something that allows people to see things happen in real time. It makes a big difference, and people think it's kind of magic. It's been a really fun experience to get people exposed to these environments who never thought any of this stuff was possible.
Chris, could you show how we add a notebook tab to a channel?
Sure.
You're already in there, so.
Yep. Just clicking on the plus to add any tab. And then what you will see is different things like OneNote. So I just went ahead and picked here, and then it basically allowed me to pick from all the existing notebooks. And we know that for Teams VirtualMania, this is the notebook that we have, and I could pin a specific page there as well. So we happen to pin the useful info section within that notebook, and that's basically how we do it.
Are you able to actually create one for us that we could work on this afternoon?
Not in the time frame we have ad hoc, because you're not part of the team, and knowing we have 30 minutes, I'm not going to do that right now.
Thank you.
Yep. But it's really simple.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Yep. So basically all that we did is we created a team. Microsoft, this is hosted in the Microsoft environment. I then invited, because I'm the only Microsoft employee on the call, I then invited Marianne and Mark and Kate into this. So you can see they're in here as guests. The other thing that I did is I actually created a private channel. So maybe I want a channel just for organizers, where we can go ahead and have only a subset of the people be here. So Mark, I didn't put you into the organizers channel. I left you out just to kind of demonstrate we can have different folks that are in here. So maybe Kate and Marianne and I are part of the organizing team, and we can have a super.
I felt like I was missing out on something.
Yeah, because we wanted to keep you away from some of the NDA content, because like I said, the first rule of Fight Club or the first rule of MVP Summit is that you don't talk about MVP Summit. So we're gonna have all of our super secret conversations here.
Rules. I broke the rules.
But this is a really great thing that we use in Microsoft. Again, not just for events like this. Oftentimes we're collaborating with customers and we might want a private back channel just for Microsoft employees where we can talk about and brainstorm around certain solutions, certainly during a meeting like this, but also as part of our ongoing collaboration. And then the last thing we did, to Mark's point, is we have a little social channel. So I live here in Boston, and I'm still getting over the fact that Tom Brady has left the Patriots, and I'm going to miss, here's that, Mark, your GIF or your GIF around, Tom Brady showing off his rings when he got his 6th Super Bowl ring. Mark used it for a more important purpose, like posting news and announcements around the managed metadata service announcement that came out on Friday, as well as Mark trying to sign up for an SP run to go ahead and get some folks to sign up for a virtual run together. And there's our friend Forrest running down the street from Forrest Gump.
That's the fictional part of this meeting, because I don't think I've ever done that.
Actually run like that?
Yeah.
So we wanted to spend the first part of the demo going through organizing a team to potentially support an event. What we're thinking to pivot to next is actually going into some of the meeting controls, as well as some of the meeting capabilities for meeting engagement. Before I do that, though, are there any other questions on just the basic team structure? All right. So I mentioned that when you schedule meetings in Teams, you certainly can do it directly through the Teams client. You also can do it from the Outlook client. So in Outlook, when I actually created this Teams VirtualMania, I created with a link, shared the link with Mark and Marianne and Kate. Mark then put that into Eventbrite to send it out to you all. But basically, I just scheduled like any other meeting in Microsoft Teams. Now, you might have noticed that many of you were sitting in a lobby. We did that because we started prepping at 11:30, and while we love you all, we didn't want you to come into our back channel while we were working on finishing up our talk track and doing a last minute kind of review of everything. So the way that I organized and controlled that is by clicking on this meeting options link. And if I go here, you'll see it actually pops me out to a web page where I can control who can get in. So I said that the only people that can bypass the lobby are people within my company, which is inside of Microsoft. I could have also said any trusted organization. So when Mark and Kate and Marianne came in, they came through the lobby. I did not let callers, so even if you called in through a phone, I didn't let you come through without automatically, being admitted in. I also controlled who's a presenter. So when I go into the meeting itself, you're going to see in a second that there are different meeting roles that you're not seeing right now, where I actually went ahead and promoted Mark and Kate and Marianne to be a different role. So instead of being a standard attendee, they're actually a presenter, which means they can do things like start or stop a recording, invite other people into the meeting, go ahead and admit people that are sitting in the lobby as well. So there are some additional controls, and this is something that has really been heightened quite a bit by people worrying about people Zoom bombing or team bombing meetings where maybe you don't have a meeting that has a password on it or passcode on it. But there's additional controls you can apply to platforms like Teams and Zoom, where you can go ahead and say, look, these people are only the ones that can present, or people have to sit in the lobby and be explicitly invited into or accepted into the meeting as well. So with that, I'm going to go into the actual meeting experience. So you're all in the meeting, so you're going to see what I'm seeing on my screen. One of the things that I have access to that you don't yet is the ability to actually raise my hand. So if I wanted to, this is coming soon. Actually, we announced this morning that the backgrounds are coming soon that Mark was asking about. We publicly announced that the raise your hand is going to be coming out soon. Again, as I mentioned earlier, as Mark noted, I work for Microsoft, so I have a lot access to early capabilities. I did have to turn off some things that I'm not allowed to show you because those are under strict NDA within Microsoft. So I turned off some advanced preview features, but the ability to raise a hand is coming soon into Teams. So when I clicked on that little raise hand, you saw that it actually lit up next to my name that I was raising my hand.
Hey, Chris, question. We have a question. Can you have music playing in the lobby or a video clip playing in the lobby? All the Clive saw was a black screen.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I know that sort of thing has come up before, but I'm not aware of the ability right now to have any sort of, content that's looping. Now, if you do a live event through Microsoft Stream or the live events platform, you do have options to have different content queued up. So one of the things we often do within Microsoft for a live event, which is that up to 10,000 or 100,000 person event like the keynote, for that you definitely could queue up certain content and music that's playing there. And we actually would do that with Satya's live event. We'll say the event's going to start in 5 minutes and there's something that's rolling or up on the screen. So that is something we've done during the live events, but not during a regular team meeting. All right. So now that I'm in the meeting itself, and we talked through some of the meeting options, one of the things that I could do, if I click on a little ellipse here, and I'm not sure why my screen is not responding right now. So I can go ahead and
be the recursion. You know, I'm seeing me, seeing you.
Yeah.
Dots, 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 dots.
Yeah. So what I can do, and you all can still see my screen here, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to confirm that. Is I can do advanced things like manage my device settings, which is certainly if you have problems with your audio, or your speaker, or your microphone, and maybe you had multiple devices and you wanted to change to not use your speaker mic, to use a headset as I'm doing, you can go ahead and create meeting notes as part of it. You could turn on, this is Mark, the thing that's coming soon for you that I have access to within Microsoft right now, is my background effect. So currently you all can go ahead and do blurring your background like Kate is doing, where you can see she has a background image blur. So if her husband happens to walk by, you're not going to see him walk by, but I also could pick from a gallery. I also could upload a custom image if I wanted to have a different image. So I picked my beach image, and this is what's coming soon for you all.
I saw it today, so maybe I must be part of a test group. I'm privileged, Mark. Maybe you too will be.
One of these days.
Yep. So I saw an announcement over the weekend that I think it's lighting up within the next 2 weeks, I believe, was the target for folks to be able to do that outside of Microsoft. Another thing you can do is you can turn on, if you wanted to, live captions. Folks are mentioning certainly things around accessibility in different languages. So live events supports the ability to take a spoken word and translate it into up to 6 different languages. Microsoft Teams right now will just do it in the local language, where I could be speaking and actually see subtitles going across the bottom. As you're seeing, we're recording the meeting. When I'm done with this meeting, I'm going to stop the recording. It is going to create a recording file that's stored with the meeting recording. One of the tips to know right now is the meeting recording is only available within the host organization. So if I wanted to share the recording outside of my company, what we're doing right now is actually just downloading the meeting recording when it's done as an MP4 file, and then just uploading that. And that's how Marianne is getting it out onto her YouTube channel. So if you do have people outside your company that you invite to a meeting, live events again works differently. Live events makes it easier to share it. That's actually how Chris McNulty and the product teams are doing things like the Project Cortex, office hours and things like that. They're doing that through live events. But if you run something just through Microsoft Teams and you record a team meeting like this, and you do record it, it will get stored in Stream, which is part of Office 365 for your tenancy, and then you could download it. And the Stream team is working on making external sharing of meeting recordings something that will be possible without having to download and reshare. But did want to kind of share that as a little tip of something you might hit. And then as far as the meeting engagement, I'm going to click in here. We certainly talked about how Microsoft Forms could be used to engage people with a survey ahead of time. But what I want to do is actually go into the chat. And what you'll see here is I certainly can go ahead and post things and give an exclamation point and all that. But what I'll see down here, my little ... is the ability to get at and add other what we call apps to a meeting. So an app could be something like bringing in the weather or bringing in a YouTube channel. So similar to how I was pinning those apps at the top of the team channel. So how I brought in a OneNote notebook or other things like the form. This is where I can access things like, creating a quick little poll. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a quick little poll for you all. And I'm going to go ahead and let that spin up. And I'm going to ask you a question.
Chris, while that's coming out, can you make me a member of this team, because I can't see the chat right now?
You are part of the team.
Okay. When I click on the chat, it says only team members can chat. Ask the team owner to make you a member.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of doing this demo, so I won't do that for now. But I know Mark is in there, and I know Marianne is in there, so I'm not sure why you're not. Okay. So we can say how are we doing? So far, right? And do a quick little poll there, and option 1 can be great. meh. And then option 3 could be, you really want to be bad. Option 3 could be awful. And when I'm doing this, again, I can do this as part of a team meeting. I also can do it as part of a team channel. And I can say, look, responses are due by next Friday at 1 o'clock or next week by 1 o'clock. Who sees the results? Does everyone see the results, or do only I see the results? So I'm going to go ahead and say next. And I'm going to put that out in the chat for you all. And I can preview it, give me a little preview of what it's going to look like. I'm going to go ahead and click send. And that should send this out into the chat for, sounds like most of you, to be able to view and see in a second. So you can see that I just added a poll to the meeting. And now people can go in there and I can go ahead and say, you know, I think we're doing great, but what do I know? I'm biased. I can submit my vote. I can see Mark submitted one as well. So I can go ahead and do that as well. Now, another option you could do is, what if you wanted something that was more than that very quick little basic simple poll? What if you actually wanted more questions that had more question options? So I'm going to go back into my little ellipse menu, and this will probably be the last demo before we pause for more general questions and the resources and wrap-ups. But I can go back in here.
And Chris, while you're doing that, while you're waiting for that, is there an ability to show a curated questions queue to let users vote up others' questions?
So the main way that I see people doing that right now is by doing things just liking on posts. So as people are putting comments in the chat window and they start to either give it a like or give it a heart or give it a sad face or a crying face, things like that. That's the biggest way that I've seen it. If you do things in live events, there is a Q&A feature that's a moderated Q&A where people can post questions privately, but that's the main way that I've seen that today. The other option is to do something like the survey that I'm bringing up here. And again, I won't fully bring this out just in the interest of time right now.
Sounds like people are having a little bit of trouble reaching that poll, and I can't see the results. So it may be because we're guests in this tenant, not quite sure.
Yeah.
It's actually showing up. I just saw it in my chat, so I was able to, although it is telling me I'm unable to reach the app.
Yeah, so this might be a case where there are some things right now that work if you're all within the same organization, which is the typical use case. And then there are some things that may work differently if you're a guest in the team versus an external member. So some of these things right now are still kind of being worked through, and the survey capability I know is relatively new. But again, when I'm asking this sort of a question, much like with forms, I can go ahead and give multiple choices and then go ahead and give people the ability to do things like say, they're going to win the Super Bowl this year or not? No. And I can say whether people are required to give an answer, whether we allow them to answer multiple answers, which would change it from radio buttons to checkboxes. But the quick answer is that if you really want something that is available to everyone, whether it's before the meeting or even during the meeting, Microsoft Forms is the best solution for that. That is the tool that we used to generate this set of polls that we did. And again, the nice thing is that can be given out as a link within the meeting. You can embed it inside the meeting. You can share it. And as I mentioned, we're going to share with you these blog posts as well that go through best practice for delivering meetings, the differences between a Teams meeting versus a live event, as well as some of the general training resources that go through things inside an organization as well as outside the organization as well. So with that, I do know we have about 10 minutes left here. Wanted to make sure we had time for additional questions that might not have been addressed yet, as well as certainly talking about some of the resources and next steps.
And feel free to take yourself off mute if you would like to speak out loud. If Chris lets you. I think Chris is in charge.
Oh, they should be able to unmute themselves, yeah.
So I know that it's Marianne here. I just wanted to say that as somebody who's actually using Teams not within the same organization, because I'm using it with clients that are outside my tenant, some of the things that Chris was talking about, related to the fact that you're trying to utilize some of the functionality that works best when it's within the same organization. I can attest because I have been working with it on clients that come from various associations. There are a lot of workarounds, and I've been getting very good results, and you just have to really kind of think through this in your planning process when you're considering what platform, what tool is going to be best for your particular event. Then taking the time to play with it, to practice with it, and to start out relatively straightforward. Obviously, what Mark was talking about earlier with the MVP, that's a pretty complicated event. So starting out with something that's relatively low level complexity will give you an opportunity to kind of work your way up to something that's a little more complicated.
Yeah, one of the ones that's in one of those blog posts is nuanced communications. I referred to them at our last clinic. Transformed from having their internal event over leveraging Teams in a similar way as Mark mentioned, but again, all of the people were within the organization and they had to scale very quickly because they couldn't meet together in person. So it's just another customer example. And from my experience, a lot of the things that I walk through typically work really, really well when everyone's part of the same company, and the couple of things that they're working on around external engagement and sharing of videos and things like that might be, to Marion's point, something you want to test with your audience to make sure that they all have access to what you're going to use.
Yeah, you really have to think about who your audience is and tailor every bit of what you're doing with a virtual event to who that, what does that audience set make up? Like for instance, we've been involved in some online meetings with my son's school. Everybody who's on the other end, everyone participating in those is either parents or kids, and the technical level of that group is who knows, right? With the MVP Summit, we knew that everybody was a very technical person. So, you can do different things. Do you have a lot of content you want to share, or is it really just about talking? Is it, are you trying to make decisions, which we'll talk about in our next webinar in a couple week and a half? Or are you really just trying to present stuff? So there are lots of different considerations that go into this that will have an impact on how you use any tools versus what the content is that you're presenting.
Yeah, and I think Mark, you talked about it at the beginning when you talked about culture, right? Being very cognizant of the culture of your audience, and if you're working directly with clients, I've got some clients who are sales organizations that have a much bigger tolerance for whether it's unique backgrounds to how people are presenting themselves, if people are casual or not casual. And then in other cases, if I'm working with financial institutions or pharmaceutical companies or anything that is a more regulated environment, their tolerance for those things is quite less, and their technology, their comfort with technology is quite low. And so, that whole consideration for the culture and the culture that you're trying to build is a major component to what types of tool sets, but also how you're organizing the meeting and what kind of engagement you're asking for. I think that's another piece that is really a part of the consideration. What kind of engagement are you trying to drive? That should also dictate some of the activities and some of the tools that you're going to use online to get people to play with you.
Looks like Ruth has a question.
I do. Can you guys hear me okay?
Can. Hi, Ruth.
Okay, good. Because I'm testing out my new spiffy microphone that I got. My question is in regards to Teams on the desktop versus Teams in the web. I mean, are there still going to be a lot of similarities between the two, or are there going to be hiccups where some things will work on the desktop and some things won't work in the web environment?
Yep, so I'm going to give you a link to this article. So there are some differences between the Teams apps that are on Windows and Mac versus what's on iOS and Android versus what's in the browser. The biggest thing to know from a browser perspective is that you want to use Chrome, either Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge Chromium are the preferred web clients. They're pretty well supported. If you look here in this page, Microsoft Edge is fully supported, as well as Google Chrome is fully supported, so long as you're using version 72 or later. And I think the current version right now is, I think, 74, the last I checked. There are some limitations right now with Firefox and Safari. But yeah, so this article goes through the different capabilities across the platform, but our goal really is to have parity across Windows, Mac, iOS, Android. We have a Linux client now, as well as different browser clients, but it's not 100% there right now.
Thank you. That's really helpful. The mic I'm using is a Yeti.
Those are good ones.
Awesome.
Yes, they are very good.
A Yeti,
Ruth, it's
like
a
an
great question. And I was just going to say, at some point, Chris, would be nice for us to click on the link at the bottom of our slides and show them the resources that we are producing for them. We're actually curating these very types of articles for you. And as Chris is doing that, somebody else just raised their voice and might want to speak. So I'll make sure I put my mic on.
It was me asking if a Yeti was like the abominable snowman. This is Ruth's microphone.
Yes. Oh, I don't know. It could be. At least I was able to find it. I mean, I can't find a webcam to save my life, so I was able to find an app to put on my mobile phone so I can use my mobile phone as a video camera in the meantime. But it's crazy because right now everybody's working from home, so it's really getting difficult to find those certain pieces and parts that people need and want to, have a better quality of a microphone or a video camera working from home right now. I'll put the link to the Yeti where I got it here in just a second.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
So does anybody else have any other questions for us? And anything that you'd like Chris to talk about? Anything you'd like Kate to talk about, Mark to talk about? Because we're just close to the witching hour here, so we want to make sure that we get your questions in before we head out.
And while you're typing in or unmuting yourself, Chris is displaying the curated resources we have planned for you. You have the ability to sort in any way you want. You can see we're automatically telling you the number of each type of resource that we have. We have a look but don't touch, so you can do all different types of sorting and you're not going to hurt the file. We are going to be constantly adding them. So Chris, I will make a point of getting that link right back from you so I can put it out here. But you can see we've got some articles which are about the experience of being virtual. And we have a lot of articles that are specific to the capabilities of Teams and Office 365. And we have a special article that is just simply a link. There is a coronavirus Power BI application that is highly robust. It's even more detail and more pages and more ability to cut and slice and dice than the Johns Hopkins platform. So we can find that, you can find that in there, just do a Control F and just find Power BI, or you can just kind of look for the far right, the kind of technology, you'll see Power BI as one of them. Yep, Chris is right there right now. Let us know if this is something that's helpful for you. Let us know also if there's other content you want us to curate for you.
So Mark, we're just about at 1 o'clock. We got about a minute left. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's coming next?
Sure. We have one more webinar in this series that we've got planned. We may plan more, but on April 16th, which is, I guess, 10 days from now, we're going to talk about, and I think we alluded to this a little bit, virtual brainstorming, innovation, and decision making. So that's a little bit different than just having a meeting or present or doing an event. It's more about reaching some conclusions. I always think meetings are supposed to be for that too, but not always. So we're going to talk through some ways that we can make this stuff happen in a virtual sense, which is very different than when you've got a whiteboard in a conference room and you're able to just write stuff up and put post-its on things and all that sort of stuff in the real world. If you want to register for that, it's the same link you may have followed before, and that's the registration link there at the bottom. And the resources for this and all of the webinars that we do, whether we go forward with 10 more or we just do these 3, will be at that bottom link. If there are things that come up that you're interested in after these webinars, feel free to reach us at the info at teamsthursdaynewengland.org email address as well.
I'd just like to say thank you very much for having this webinar. It has been so helpful. I don't know if you guys realize just how helpful.
Great. That's great to hear. And I should have said, and all of this is supposed to be under the aegis of the Teams Thursday New England event, which we had scheduled for April 2nd. We hope it will be June 3rd, though I think we'll probably have to make a call on that sometime soon. If you're in the New England area, and I know some of you are very definitely not, we would love to see you come to that event if you could. If we can't have it, we may try and do something virtual for that as well. Stay tuned for that.
Thanks for joining us today, folks. We really appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank you.
all.
Thanks, everybody. Great job.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.